A few months ago I made a video going over all the reasons why I don't think the theory known as StitchlineGames works. StitchlineGames, for those who don't know, is the theory that all the Stitch Wraith stingers and stories connected to them in FNaF Frights take place in the game's timeline. In that video from a few months ago, I talked about all the plot holes that that theory creates, and I did manage to get some people to rethink it, including the Darkrooms crew, but recent information has caused StitchlineGames to be a bit more accepted among the communities that I'm involved in. So surrounding this new information, I want to do a bit of a rehash of that other StitchlineGames video, and discuss whether or not the theory can work. The big idea is that it can be possible, but would kind of ruin the story and create a lot of plot holes, which is what the other video was about. Some people misunderstood some of my points, some just hated the video without giving any reason, and some people, without naming names, just focused on one thing I said and something that wasn't even a main point, and considered it to be the star of the video. To that I say, what the f***? But brushing past that, I think we should just get started. I'll go over the new evidence for and against the theory, and I'll once again go over some of the evidence from the other video and expand on it. So without further ado, let's get started.
Make me a hero, someone to turn to and rely on their will to win. Make me a hero who puts up a fight both day and night. Oh.
A while ago, some people noticed that Tales from the Beatleblex is said to be a follow-up to FNaF Frights. In the past, Scholastic has used the term follow-up to describe a sequel. However, Scholastic also advertised Tales from the Beatleblex by telling us to catch up on FNaF Frights, which would supposedly be telling us Tales is in fact a sequel. So is there a rebuttal to this? Well, yes. Whether StitchlineGames is true or not, Tales is a follow-up to Frights. In real life. Like, it's the same style of books, same format. The definition of follow-up doesn't always mean it in terms of continuation. It can, yeah, but it can also mean a repetition of something that's already been done. It's a different series of books with the same style, so yeah, it's a follow-up. But that really doesn't have to mean that it's a follow-up in the story, because some FNaF Frights stories, like what we found in Coming Home, while they work in the Stitch line by itself, don't work in the games. In What We Found, it said that a phone system has not yet been installed at FNaF Frights, or FNaF Fright, sorry, I always get it confused, but it will be soon, and Springtrap appears before the phone system does. FNaF 3 shows the phone system as already obviously being in place when Springtrap first appears, because Phone Dude is the one that tells us that Springtrap appears over the phone.
You're not gonna believe this. We found one. A real one.
The FNaF Fright location is also different. That, among other things like the protagonist dying day 1, tells us that what we found cannot be in the game's timeline. Coming Home also shows Susie with brown hair and eyes, contrary to her blonde hair and blue eyes in the games. So since Tales from the Beatleblex is in the timeline of the games, if it's a follow-up to Frights and we have to catch up on all the Frights, that doesn't make sense because even if StitchlineGames is true, it isn't a sequel to every story. There's also the fact that B7 doesn't even take place any later than some of the Fright stories. Step Closer is in modern day, B7 is like 1984 to 2000 or so. So that can't be considered a follow-up in universe. So yeah, it's referring to a follow-up in real life. So because of all that, catching up on the Frights more likely refers to the book style, as the Tales from the Beatleblex stories are the same. It could also be referring to the logic and science presented by FNaF Frights, as they are obviously connected. Stuff like Remnant, Agony, Possession, Illusion Discs, and stuff like that are all still relevant in Tales, and they were expanded on from Frights. So catching up on Frights would help us to understand some of what's going on in Tales. However, one of those concepts, Remnant, is especially relevant in one of the most popular pieces of evidence for StitchlineGames, and of course, I'm talking about Frailty. I've been rethinking Frailty recently regarding whether or not it really does prove StitchlineGames or not. However, I recently noticed something that informs me that Frailty most likely is not Eleanor's doing, even if StitchlineGames is true. Now, this isn't exactly a point against StitchlineGames, it's more of a point that it's just not Eleanor's doing, but it's not certain or anything. It's not definitive evidence, it's just something I think I should bring up, because I feel like the timelines don't exactly match. In the FNaF Frights epilogues, the FNaF 6 fire is mentioned numerous times, and if the Pizzaplex had been built over it, we most certainly would have gotten reference to it. So that means that the epilogues, if StitchlineGames is to be true, must take place before the Pizzaplex was made. The Pizzaplex by the time of Security Breach has to be open for 5 years, and before that, it would have probably taken at least 2 years to build. And that's honestly me being generous. So if StitchlineGames is to be true, that there is about a 7-year gap between the FNaF Frights epilogues at the very least. However, in Fetch, which is about 5 years prior to the epilogues, Fazbear Entertainment is ancient and unknown to teenagers. Step Closer has a Freddy's location open, and that story takes place in modern times. This would imply that Fazbear Entertainment is completely dead by the time of Fetch, and if there had been a revival, we certainly would have heard about it by the time of the epilogues. This means that FNaF VR can't have taken place yet either. So because of that, let's say that there is a 10-year gap between the epilogues and Security Breach, were StitchlineGames to be canon. Freddy Fazbear's Mega Pizzaplex was already open by the time of Frailty, meaning that currently 14-year-old Jessica would have had her run-in with Eleanor when she was 9 at the oldest. If this all really happened that long ago, how has the pendant not been obliterated yet? At the rate that it is scraped into nothing in the story, it would have been completely gone in the 5 years. Frailty as a story has many obvious connections to To Be Beautiful, with Sarah, who seems to be about 14, which is the same age as Jessica. Given the connections between these two stories, it seems more likely that Jessica became like this, not recently, but within a year. It's just that she doesn't have enough time to have been a victim of Eleanor because Eleanor dies in the final epilogue, before Fazbear Entertainment is brought back. This either means that StitchlineGames isn't true, and this pendant is the doing of something else, something Eleanor was meant to set up. I can already hear a few people yelling for me to not say Elizabeth, but whatever. But if StitchlineGames is true, then it seems like Eleanor, whose original body is now just an empty husk, could now be inhabited by something else, something that took over her body and continued what Eleanor was doing, like maybe actually Shadow Freddy, or... yeah, I'm not going to say that. Everyone's going to yell at me if I say that. Yeah, never mind. Alright. So this could technically be possible, but I prefer the option of StitchlineGames not being true. Obviously, what I prefer is not a factor into what is canon, though, and like I said, I have been rethinking Frailty recently. Frailty being about some separate entity from Eleanor, someone Eleanor was setting up, makes sense in theory. It's just weird that they use the same remnant pendant from Fazbear Frights if they aren't meant to be in the same universe. I don't see this as solid evidence for StitchlineGames, but I also don't think it's bad evidence. It can work either way. So we've gone over a little bit of the Fazbear Frights timeline and how it doesn't really match Frailty, but if we disregard Frailty, does it match Security Breach itself? Some people disagree, but at this point it is 100% confirmed that Security Breach takes place in either 2035 or 2046. The Fred Masquerade picture has a date resembling either, and there's drawings of Glamrock Freddy, meaning he existed by the latest 2046. 5 years after 2046 doesn't match the calendar found in Security Breach, meaning that's the latest possible year for Security Breach to take place. So does the Stitch line match the timeline of Security Breach? To make it work, we need the Stitch Race stories to take place around, let's say, 2039 at the latest, just to be generous, and assuming Security Breach is in 2046, which is the latest possibility. This evidence actually comes from my friend Tux, so thanks to him for laying all this out. We know FNaF 6's events do happen in the Stitch line, whether the Stitch line is actually in the game's timeline or not. FNaF 6 takes place in 2023. In the Man in Room 1280, well, I don't know why I say 1280. I feel like most people say 1280. I just say 1280, and I have absolutely no idea why. But yeah, in the Man in Room 1280, William is said to have been there for many years. The actual building itself, that is now Heracles Hospital, was built centuries ago, but was bought by a billionaire 10 years before the actual events of the story. This has actually happened a couple times before, one example being in Out of Stock, where the Emporium, one of the only places with Plush Trap Chaser toys being sold, almost closes multiple times, but a billionaire always buys it out for whatever reason. We've seen that a mysterious person has been buying Fazbear Entertainment related properties, which makes it especially weird here that the renovations of the hospital also make the place cleaner and similar to Freddy's locations that we've seen in the past. Based on this, it seems like the billionaire likely actually bought the hospital because of the Man in Room 1280. He bought it because William was there. That means that he was here for at least those 10 years, pushing us ahead to 2033 being when the story takes place. In Fetch, the kids don't actually know anything about Freddy's or Fazbear Entertainment, and since they're 14, the location probably closed about 15 years ago. Though I will say 10 just to be generous, like I said. The Ultimate Guide claims it to be at least 10 as well, but I don't really take that book into account as there are a lot of issues with that book. In some cases, the book even gets lore wrong, so I don't really think it has viable information. Either way, let's just say the Freddy's location in Fetch closed 10 years ago, and that's being very generous. Fetch was one of the items Andrew infected in the Fazbear Entertainment Distribution Center, and Fetch is in the Freddy's location, meaning that he was sent here after the events of the Man in Room 1280, after 2033, meaning that was when the location was still up and running. That places Fetch in 2043 at the earliest. Already we're past the earlier possible threshold, but not only that, Jake actually also appears in Fetch. He's 4 years old in Fetch, and in the real Jake, he's 9, placing the real Jake in 2048 at the earliest. Margie in the second Faster Frights epilogue says that she lived in this house for 3 years, and in the real Jake, it said that she lived there when Jake first got cancer when he was 6, meaning the epilogues also take place in 2048, probably only a few months after the real Jake. That's past security breach. The timelines don't match. So how would StitchlineGames be true in this case? Even if we were to disregard the fact that the Pizzaplex isn't mentioned once, Afton is in the epilogues as the Afton amalgamation as an aftermath of the FNaF 6 fire, meaning the appearance of Burntrap and security breach contradicts that. Speaking of Burntrap, let's talk about the reason that I actually made this video. Because the Tales from the Pizzaplex books are usually leaked before they actually come out, I sometimes accidentally get spoiled, but most of the time it's not an actual spoiler and just something that people say is confirmed, but that doesn't actually end up getting confirmed. For example, when Epilogue 1 was leaked, a lot of people said that it confirmed StitchlineGames. Then I read it, and literally nothing connected to StitchlineGames. I guess the idea was that it confirmed Tales from the Pizzaplex was in the games, but that wasn't new information, so I don't really know what all the fuss was about. But something similar happened again. I was told that in the 4th epilogue, 2 things are confirmed. The first is that the endoskeleton is the original endoskeleton from the body of Scraptrap, and the second is that Afton feeds on fear. Now, I think it's clear that the endoskeleton is possessed by Afton, but what I don't understand is how the epilogue confirms Afton feeds on fear. I'm not saying he doesn't, I mean, he basically says that he does in FNaF AR.
I can taste the fear in your breath. You will fear me. It is not your flesh that sustains me. It is your fear. Your fear will consume you.
But I don't really know how this epilogue confirms that. But the idea of the endoskeleton being from Afton's original body just cannot work. We learn that the endoskeleton is called a mimic endo and can basically contort and fit inside basically any animatronic suit. What this basically means is that the mimic is a springlock endoskeleton. The fact that it can fit inside any suit explains how it was able to get inside the dog animatronic at the end of the 3rd epilogue. So yeah, it's the endoskeleton of a springlock suit, but that doesn't have to mean that it's from Afton. There's a lot of problems with it being from Afton, which I went over in videos before. This endoskeleton is burned, which is one thing that people believe suggests it to be Afton, but this endoskeleton has only a burned body, but its head is not burned. This tells us that the endo was given a brand new head, but in FNaF 6, Afton is missing a hand, and the endo has 2 hands. This wouldn't be such a problem if the arm of the endoskeleton wasn't burned, but it is, so that doesn't match Scraptrap. On top of that, Scraptrap is still trapped underneath the pizza place. Freddy tells us that when we go down to the Afton ending that Vanny brought him down here to clear the path. Clear the path to what exactly? Couple that with the fact that we have no way to get down to the vents of the building, and I think it's pretty clear that Afton's body is still underneath the Pizzaplex, underneath the pizza place too, which not only goes against the endoskeleton being Afton's original, but also contradicts the man in room 1280. However, there is one thing I don't understand if we go by this. Glitchtrap and Cassidy are both present in both the Freddy Fazbear's Virtual Experience and Princess Quest because circuit boards from Afton's body, which also contained Cassidy's spirit as she was tormenting him in Ultimate Custom Night, were scanned into them. The problem stems from Afton's body still being trapped under the pizza place, meaning they couldn't have gotten the circuit boards. However, after thinking about it, it's possible that the Pizzaplex was actually being built before the VR game was made, so Glamrock Freddy could have cleared the path, not because of Glitchtrap, but simply because he was told to. Maybe Vanny wasn't the one who got Freddy to clear the path, but rather Elizabeth, or whoever you believe Patient 46 to be. And she took the circuit boards and other stuff and sent them to Fazbear Entertainment herself, which then created Glitchtrap, who possessed Vanny. She killed kids, she possessed endoskeletons, she melted them down and infused them into Afton's original body, as well as combining it with the endoskeleton and possibly the Springtrap from Pressure, creating Burntrap. Maybe the timeline of events is just a bit different than we thought. I'll talk about this a bit further in my upcoming Pizzaplex era timeline video, which will be premiering by the end of the month, but hopefully sooner, so stay tuned for that. Anyway, the reason I'm talking about all this is because if it was revealed in the future that the Burntrap endoskeleton is from William's original body, not only would it be pretty dumb for him to have been taken away, head replaced, and then shipped straight back anyway and used to repair him, but it just wouldn't make sense. It would be really inconsistent. It wouldn't match the information that we have, and it just wouldn't make sense. So if that was true, that would cause a massive inconsistency, and if the story was inconsistent regarding that, then StitchlineGames might as well be true, because of all the inconsistencies that entail. Excluding the ones that I talked about this video, if you want to find out what those inconsistencies are, check out my other video on why StitchlineGames creates more problems than it solves. It's 35 minutes though, so I guess only watch it if you have time, but I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, then make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you want to. But one thing I didn't bring up in this video is that Phasma Frights and Tales from the Pizza Blacks are 100% connected, but not in the way that you may think. So to find out why, stay tuned for my video on that coming in the near future. But anyways guys, I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye guys!